is they actually put the kids in the cart. They know it's a volatile situation with Andrew, as I said, all the things going on behind the doors. So she was playing with the sympathy vote by putting the kids in there. She should have kept them way out.
Well, we don't know, but I think you make a good point, Eddie, that they knew there were protests. So at some point, that decision of involving the children in the cart would have been taken.
So you just watched that clip. And this caller has opened a conversation that the royal establishment probably would rather avoid. Because now the discussion is not just about trooping the color. It is not just about tradition. It is not just about a family appearance. The conversation has shifted to something much more uncomfortable. Why were the children placed in the middle of such a controversial and tense public moment? That is the question. And it is a question that deserves to be asked. Because the royal family cannot operate in a bubble anymore. They cannot pretend that every public appearance exists in some fantasy world where everyone is smiling, waving flags, and applauding. The reality is very different. The reality is that there are people who protest. There are people who criticize. There are people who are angry. And none of that should have been a surprise. Trooping the color happens every year. The planning happens months in advance. The security planning happens, the media planning happens, the public reaction is considered. This is not a situation where anyone could say, oh no, we had no idea people might object. That argument does not really hold up because the history is there. The protests have happened before, the criticism has happened before, the debates about the monarchy have happened before. So when people look at the decision to put the children in such a visible position, they're asking, was this really the best choice? Because the children are not the ones benefiting from the image. They are not the ones controlling the cameras. They are not the ones shaping the headlines. The adults are. The institution is. And that is where the criticism is being directed. Because if you know there is going to be anger outside the gates, if you know there are people who are going to protest, why put children in the middle of that environment? That is the issue. Nobody is blaming children for appearing. The children are children. They are simply following the decisions made by adults. But adults in powerful positions have a responsibility, especially when they are representing one of the most watched institutions in the world. The royal family understands symbolism better than almost anyone. They have built an entire system around it. The uniforms, the ceremonies, the carefully timed appearances, the photographs, the balcony moments, the family scenes. All of it creates an image, and images have power. A royal child waving from a carriage is not viewed the same way as an adult royal standing alone. That's just reality. The emotional response is different. People soften, people focus on innocence, people shift their attention. And that is exactly why critics are questioning this decision. Because if the environment was already expected to be difficult, why create a situation where the children become part of the emotional center of that moment? Why not keep them away from the controversy? Why not allow the adults to face the public reaction directly? That is what many people are asking. Because there is a long history of powerful institutions using family imagery to create a sense of warmth and connection. Again, this is not something unique to the royal family.
Politicians do it, companies do it, public figures do it. It is one of the oldest tricks in the public relations book. A difficult story can become a softer story when you place a family image at the center. And that is why the caller's comment hit such a nerve. Because he challenged the image. He questioned the strategy. He questioned the decision. And suddenly, people started looking at the moment differently. Instead of simply seeing a royal family appearance, people started asking, what was the purpose? What was the message? What reaction was expected? Because the monarchy has always understood that emotion matters. For centuries, the institution has survived through ceremony and connection. But the modern public is different. People are questioning things. People are looking deeper. The days of simply accepting every royal image are over. Now, people analyze. They debate. They ask why. And that is what is happening here. The uncomfortable part for the royal family is that the criticism is not really about one carriage. It's about trust. It's about whether people believe what they are seeing. Because when an institution constantly depends on public approval, every decision matters. Every appearance becomes a test. Every image becomes a message. And bringing children into a moment where negative reactions were expected naturally raises questions. Some will say, this is tradition. But critics will respond, tradition does not remove responsibility. Tradition does not mean every decision should escape criticism. A tradition can still be examined. A tradition can still be questioned, especially when children are involved. And this is where the royal family faces a difficult reality. They want the public to see the children as part of a normal family, but they also present them as part of the future of the institution. Those two things create a conflict, because the moment the children become symbols, people start analyzing how those symbols are being used, and that is unavoidable. You cannot place children at the center of a massive global event and then expect people not to discuss the meaning behind it. The cameras will be there, the headlines will be there, the debate will be there. That's the world the royal family has created for itself, a world where every appearance becomes a message. And this is why many critics are questioning Kate's role in the decision. Because as a parent, the argument goes, protecting children from unnecessary controversy should always be the priority. If there is a possibility of hostility, if there is a possibility of public anger, if there is a possibility that the children could be caught in the middle of a political or institutional dispute, then why take that risk? That is the criticism. The argument is not that the children did something wrong. The argument is that adults should have thought more carefully, because children should not be used as emotional protection for an institution. They should not become the soft image placed in front of a difficult conversation. They should not be the ones absorbing the tension created by adult decisions. And that is why this moment has become so controversial. Because the public is not only watching what happens, they are questioning why it happens. The royal family has spent generations mastering the art of presentation, but the modern audience is no longer just watching the presentation. They are examining the production behind it. They are looking at the decisions. They are looking at the timing. They are looking at the circumstances. And sometimes the biggest questions come from the smallest details. A carriage, a wave, a family image, a decision. All of it becomes part of a much bigger conversation. And this caller basically forced that conversation into the open, because whether people agree with him or not, he raised a question that cannot simply be brushed away. If the atmosphere was known, if the controversy was known, if the protests were expected, then why put the children there? That is the question. And until people feel there is a convincing answer, the debate will continue. Because the monarchy is not just an institution anymore. It is a public performance watched by millions. And every performance comes with criticism. Every image comes with interpretation. Every decision comes with consequences. And this trooping the color moment has shown once again that the biggest challenge facing the royal family is not only what happens inside the palace walls, it is how the outside world sees them. And right now, many people are asking whether the image was worth the cost.
because the children should never be the ones carrying the weight of an institution's problems. And another thing people are noticing is the strange contradiction in the way the royal family presents itself. On one hand, they often emphasize privacy and protection when it comes to the children. They talk about shielding young royals from pressure and allowing them to have a normal childhood. But then, when there is a major public event where the institution needs a strong emotional image, the children suddenly become central figures. That contrast is exactly what critics are questioning. People are asking whether the children are being protected from the spotlight or whether they are being brought into the spotlight when it benefits the institution. Because there's also a difference between attending a family celebration and becoming part of a carefully watched public moment during controversy. Nobody is saying children should never appear in public. That would be unrealistic. But timing matters. Context matters. When an event is already surrounded by debate, criticism, and public anger, the decision to place children at the front of that moment naturally invites questions. The adults making these decisions have to understand that public perception is not created by accident. And let's talk about the bigger picture. The monarchy has always depended on creating emotional connections with the public. The image of generations continuing, children representing the future, and family unity has always been a major part of the royal story. But in the modern age, people are not only looking at the picture, they are asking what the picture is designed to achieve. The audience is more aware of messaging now. They notice when certain images appear at certain moments, and they are no longer afraid to challenge what they see. The most uncomfortable part of this entire discussion is that the criticism could have been avoided. If the royal family wanted to avoid this conversation, the simplest option was not to put the children in a situation where they could become part of the controversy. Yet they made the choice, knowing the attention would be intense. And now people are analyzing that choice. Because when an institution has decades of experience managing public appearances, people naturally expect every major decision to be intentional. Another point that has people talking is the idea of responsibility. The royal family is not an ordinary family attending a local event. Their appearances carry enormous attention because they represent a much larger institution. That means decisions around public appearances are not only personal choices, they become public choices too. When millions of people are watching, every decision becomes part of a bigger conversation, and critics argue that if the institution knows this, then it should also understand the responsibility that comes with placing young family members in highly charged moments. There is also the question of whether the presence of the children changes the entire conversation around accountability. Instead of the focus remaining on the issues facing the monarchy, the attention can quickly shift toward protecting, defending, or discussing the children. Critics argue that this creates a distraction from the original concerns people are raising. The uncomfortable reality for any powerful institution is that emotional imagery can influence public reaction, and that is why people examine these moments so closely. The debate is not about the children themselves, but about the choices made by the adults controlling the situation. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.